Okay, this is what we are going to tell you today. I'm not reading it, but we will go through it. We already knew about the OECD. What we might know is that the OECD has today we have 38 member countries in the world. We have also 5 key partners: Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, and South Africa. And these countries altogether represent about 80% of the world trade and investments. We are following a process of enlargement, and currently we have 6 other countries that are working to enter the organization, and these are Argentina, Brazil, Bulgaria, Croatia, Peru, and Romania. What we do, the OECD monitor trends, make analysis, economic analysis, collect data, and cover basically many policy areas. Over the past year, our division has developed more than 100 territorial reviews, what we call territorial reviews at national and at local level. The reviews are a specific approach of analysis of the organization. They follow a common framework, and they are done to assess the economic performance of a country or a region, policies and actions for regional development, and the multi-level governance settings. Regarding Sweden, just to give some example, we have done in 2017 a national multi-level governance review of the country. In 2017, we have also done a territorial review of the NSPA regions. We have done in 2018 a territorial review of the mega region of Western Scandinavia, and last year we have done a territorial review of Gotland. So basically, Sweden is very active with our group and is always been participating in our activity every year. In fact, the 2017 territorial reviews, yes, we have some gaps in the slides. The NSPA reviews of 2017 basically work analyzing all the 14 regions of the network, and it serves to discover common challenges, and we provide a set of recommendations and action plans to develop together the economic and social parts of the regions. Examples of common challenges that we discovered during the review was obviously that all the regions had low density population and low density economy, aging population, demographic issues, low productivity growth, an economy dependent on raw material and the public sector, and mismatches between skills and demand offer. So Enrique will get a little bit more in depth on these issues, but I will jump into the current project that we are still developing with the NSPA. Again, this is a new project, is developed together with the DG reform of the European Commission, and is funded by the EU Technical Support Instruments, and it targets all the 14 regions. That means that the TSI, this funding from the Commission, cover the cost of the project from Finland and Sweden, and Norway participates basically co-founding the project since it's not part of the Union. Why we are doing this project? I mean, this has various aspects. One aspect is to monitor what is being done and how these 14 regions has evolved since the last time we made the review in 2017. The idea is to develop new analysis and new recommendations, and to take a further step ahead, basically. The other point is to have a specific analysis on the multi-level multi-level governance aspects alongside the 14 regions, and also all the collaboration, vertical and horizontal and cross-border. And the last focus of the project is to help in implementing the Green Deal, green and digital transition within the European Commission, European Union policies. Still white. So, this project will last for 2 years, basically, starting in September, will finish in summer 2024, and includes a number of outputs that are workshops, study missions, one report on regional policy, one report on multi-level governance, capacity building seminars, and a final conference that will present all the final findings. What we have done so far is organizing a number of workshops and meetings to start analyzing the problems. We have distributed to the regions a policy questionnaire that should be collected at the end of February. That is quite an important passage of the methodology we use for territorial reviews, because gives us a lot of information from the ground. And we will start study visits to the region in April. Probably we will have 3 or 4 study visits between April and June. So this is a little bit what we are doing with the NSPA. Clearly is a big process, and is a long series of steps. And for example, tomorrow in this hotel we will have a technical meeting with all the regions participating in the project, and we will have also a discussion with policy representatives of the national level and of the regions in order to further keep the analysis and the discussion. So I think I can leave the floor to Enrique.
Thank you, Stefano. Can you hear me okay? Good, excellent. I have here 96 slides. It's not true. There's some problems with the technology. But I think, people say you shouldn't present and read your presentation, so now we have to fill in the gaps for you. I'd like to talk about a couple of things. One is the difference between when we did this review, 2017, and now. The world has changed. There's been the pandemic, there's been a war, and that brings new challenges and new sort of a new framework. What we've seen in the OECD in our analysis that we've done over the last years is that since the global financial crisis from 2008, there's been a growing gap between the largest cities, particularly the large metropolitan areas, and everybody else, and specifically the low densely populated areas that are far away from markets, regions such as the NSPA. We see that this gap has been continued and sustained. In some countries, it creates a lot of problems. It creates mistrust, it creates places left behind, it creates a surge of populism. So across the 38 member countries, inequalities are back. And how to deal with regional inequalities has become at the forefront of what we've been asked to do. And this is a very interesting question, because we've done over 30 years of research in terms of how to deal with regional growth and regional inequalities. And in essence, we know what doesn't work. What doesn't work is to deal with inequalities with short-term and temporary measures. That is subsidizing places that are falling behind. We know that each place has some assets, has some resources. So the key question that we would like to do is to identify what these are and how to add value. One of the big roles of regional policy is what we call complementarities. There's a lot of national or EU policies that are targeted to different places. So many times the role of regional policies is to try to make sure that these policy areas talk to each other, that they are adapted to the problems and the realities of the different places. So it's being a bit more strategic and more efficient with the existing resources. And sometimes they call regional policy the policy of policies. And the third part that is very important is this notion of multi-level governance that Stefano talked before. NSPA regions up in the north, there's great potential to talk to each other, to develop common schemes, common programs that can create a greater public good. Next slide, that is difficult to to explain a graph. You don't see a graph, but essentially, when we did the review 2017, it was very interesting what we did. And something that OECD does is it benchmarks the performance of regions across a wide range of indicators, not just to national standards, but to the OECD standards. When we did this for the 14 NSPA regions, we found that all 14 regions were lagging in relation to national standards. So when we looked at the indicators such as GDP per capita or productivity, most of them were lagging with respect to national standards, but way above the OECD average. So even though northern regions might suffer from laggards, so to say, across the OECD spectrum, you have very high performance, very high standards of living. So that's something always important to remember. But the second part of the analysis that's quite interesting is that all the regions, all the 14, are converging. They're becoming more similar. There's a lot of heterogeneity. When we compare regions, for example, in Finland and Norway, the national effects are very strong, with regions from Norway having much higher levels of living standards. But there is a convergence process. This means that there's a lot of commonalities across the 14 regions that can lead to important cooperation schemes. And then we looked at a decomposition exercise that is looking at the drivers of GDP per capita. And we found something quite interesting too. We found that in terms of population, all the regions are losing population, they're aging. This is a phenomenon that is affecting all OECD countries and regions, even many cities. So it's nothing very specific to the regions. But often what we see is that productivity gains tend to be mixed. And here we saw that in the majority of regions, there was also productivity gains over the period 2000 to 2017. And a lot of the times when there's a productivity gain and there's a population loss, it's because of labor shredding. That is, people are leaving the region that, the productivity goes up. But what we found is that in all regions except 3, the employment is also positive. And that's something very, very positive, because it means that despite a lot of the demographic challenges that are present in some of these regions, productivity is increasing and employment is being generated. So that's what in economists call sustainable growth. So that was something very positive that we saw. Now, we're not going to give you the new analysis because it just started, as Stefano mentioned. So we want to go back and look at these trends to see how things are in the regions. And then we started to look at going beyond just the GDP and productivity, different indicators of quality of life. At the OECD, we have a way to measure quality of life across the 12 dimensions. And then we compared it with respect to the national standards. And what we found was that a lot of these northern regions had better environmental indicators, better housing. Life is cheaper up in the north than in Stockholm. But there were some gaps, some important gaps on the health, on delivering health, on income levels, civil engagement, and community engagement. And there was a number of indicators that were similar to the national average, such as education, safety, and jobs. So that was a bit the picture that we saw. The review basically provided close to 200 recommendations. It was a large-scale endeavor. Some recommendations are to all 14 regions, the NSPA. Some of them were specific to the different countries, so at national ministries. And then for each of the 14 regions, we have very specific recommendations. The themes that we looked into were essentially around transportation, connectivity, and including both the physical and the digital one, how to promote innovation and entrepreneurship, how to better deliver services, both education and health, and then on the governance side. And if anybody is interested on reading this report, we can send you the policy highlights or even the publication if you want to. Then what I'd like to go a little bit deeper is to try to see what has changed. And in essence, having worked at the OECD these last years, I've been really fascinated because we've seen a transformation of the world. Before, a lot of the policies were trying to be reactive. We're trying to see, okay, what is the problem in this region? How can we do things a bit better? There's been a much bigger push to try to understand what we call these megatrends. And the megatrends are these big forces that are shaping societies and economies. And these are long-term trends. I mentioned some of them like demographic change. Another one is climate change, technological change, globalization. And what we're trying to do is trying to work with a bit more forward-looking schemes, trying to understand, well, what are the challenges and the opportunities that these megatrends are generating in different types of places. So that's a little bit what we're going to try to do with this new review, that we're going to try to really identify how to address these long-term forces that are shaping societies. Now, the problem is that in the middle, we had a pandemic, and then we had a current conflict that is leading to another set of problems. Just to finish, because I want to give some time to also give some questions and answers, there's been some fascinating work around teleworking and the new opportunities that it offers. We've seen that in many cities and regions, demographic and settlement patterns are starting to change. We see that they're creating this sort of donut effect. A lot of people moving outside of cities, in the hinterlands of these places, that these digital nomads that are going outside, and in many remote and rural places, you do find like an influx of high-skilled workers that just want to work remotely. So this is an area of tremendous opportunity, given that a lot of the northern regions have very good digital infrastructures, and also have a number of amenities that we saw back below. On the climate change, we launched this agenda. We've seen that cities have been doing very aggressive measures and policies to combat climate change, both to mitigate and adapt. Whereas rural places are low densely, they've been a little bit falling behind. So we launched this agenda. It's called the OECD Rural Agenda for Climate Action. It was launched in Glasgow in COP26, and it's basically shows you that, for example, in CO2 emissions on the per capita basis, there's much higher polluting rates in some of these rural places. So that's another area we're going to be looking on this new report. And I will cut it off now to make sure we have some Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.